Let's dive right in. We're talking about one of the most incredible turning points of the 20th century, the collapse of the Soviet Union. And right at the heart of it all, there's one man, Mikhail Gorbachev. Now, he inherited a superpower that was, teetering on the brink, and he decided to make a massive bet, a gambit that would end up changing the entire world.
And that brings us to the central puzzle we're going to unpack today. How on earth did a series of reforms designed to save the Soviet Union, to strengthen it, actually end up triggering its complete and total collapse? It's a huge historical question, and we're going to get to the bottom of it.
So to understand Gorbachev's big gamble, you have to get inside his head. And this quote from the man himself, wow, it says it all. For him, this wasn't just some political maneuver. He genuinely believed it was a matter of life and death for the country. He saw opening up the system as the only way to stop it from suffocating.
But okay, before we look at the cure, we have to diagnose the disease. What exactly was the mess that Gorbachev was trying to clean up when he took power back in 1985?
To put it simply, the Soviet system was completely paralyzed. The economy was this rigid, centrally planned machine that just wasn't working anymore. It couldn't even provide basic goods, which meant long lines and massive frustration for everyday people. And politically, decades of repression had crushed any real public debate. So on the surface, it looked stable, but underneath, it was incredibly fragile.
So, facing this huge crisis, Gorbachev didn't just try a few small fixes. No way. He launched this massive four-part assault aimed at completely reshaping the Soviet state from the ground up.
These were the four main pillars of his plan. Now, you've almost definitely heard of the first two, right? Perestroika and Glasnost. They're the most famous, and as we'll see, they were the most explosive. But all four of them worked together. So let's quickly define those big two.
All right, first up, Perestroika. The goal here was pretty straightforward. Jolt the stagnant economy back to life. This meant allowing for a little bit of private business, giving the big state-run factories more independence, and just generally trying to make the Soviet economy more efficient and actually responsive to what people needed.
And then you had Glasnost, which literally translates to openness. And that's exactly what it was. It was this radical idea that the government needed to be more transparent. Suddenly, the media could criticize officials, and for the first time in generations, people could actually talk openly about the country's problems without looking over their shoulder.
Okay, and this is where our story really takes a dramatic turn. Because the gap between what these reforms were supposed to do and what they actually did was just massive. They set off this incredible chain reaction that nobody, not even Gorbachev, could control.
So, let's look at Perestroika. The goal? Fix the economy. The reality? Well, it created chaos. The partial reforms basically broke the old system before a new one was really in place. The result was even worse shortages, skyrocketing inflation, and total economic turmoil. So instead of making life better, it actually made things a lot harder for most people, at least in the short run.
Now, Glasnost is where it gets really interesting. The whole point was to get people on board by being more open. But what it actually did was open the floodgates. It was like taking the lid off a pressure cooker that had been sealed for 70 years. All this pent-up anger, all the historical grievances, all the nationalist feelings from the different republics, it all just came pouring out. The state completely lost its monopoly on information, and with it, its ability to control the story.
And this chart really shows you the whole picture. It wasn't just one thing, it was the combination of everything. Democratization was supposed to make the system more legitimate, but instead it allowed guys like Boris Yeltsin, who were openly anti-communist, to rise to power. And new thinking in foreign policy? That was the signal to Eastern Europe that the Soviet tanks weren't coming anymore, which led to the entire Warsaw Pact just crumbling.
So here's the critical mistake, the fatal flaw really, this sequencing. Gorbachev unleashed political freedom before he managed to create economic stability. Think about it. He gave people the freedom to complain and organize at the exact same moment their economic lives were getting worse. It created the absolute perfect storm. People were angry about the economy, and now, for the first time, they could actually shout about it and demand radical change.
So, let's get back to our main question. Were these reforms a genuine attempt to save the system, or were they the final push that sent it right over the cliff?
I think the most balanced way to see it is this. Gorbachev was a true believer. He honestly wanted to reform socialism, not destroy it. But the Soviet Union was fundamentally held together by two things: fear and the total control of information. By removing those controls with his reforms, he unintentionally pulled out the pins that were holding the whole structure together. He didn't push it over. He just let go.
And that leaves us with one final, really provocative question to think about. Maybe the collapse wasn't just about bad timing or a flawed plan.
maybe it shows us something more fundamental, that a political system built entirely on top-down control is just incompatible with freedom. Could it ever have been reformed, or was it always destined to shatter the moment you cracked open the doors?